This is an interview on slashers. My name is Jake, and with me for the first time is my new best friend in the whole wide world, Adam. Adam, why don't you say hello to the mutant goons from beyond?
Hey to everyone listening. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So for those of you who don't know, Adam developed the most badass Gameboy game in 2019, which I found yesterday, and I frantically messaged him and begged and groveled for him to come onto the show and talk to me, and he was very accommodating with his time. So let's all give him a polite round of applause. Yay.
You're kind, man.
So can you pronounce the name of the game for me? Because I'm still very afraid I'm saying it wrong.
It's Deadeus.
Perfect. And it's spelled Deadeus, right?
That's it. Yeah, I've heard every pronunciation under the sun, and it always makes me laugh. It's what I get.
Well, honestly, like as a Californian, I'm just proud of myself for not being like, it's Deadeus.
My favorite one will always be Daddy Ass.
Daddy Ass, yes. That is an Electra complex waiting to happen.
You hear it all, man.
So what inspired you in 2019 to make a game for a console that hasn't had a new game since, I think, Alien 3 was the last one?
So I used to work in games in America, and I'd always wanted to develop my own stuff. And I sort of had been on the side a little bit, but me and a good friend of mine, Christian, had this idea we figured a Game Boy game was like the most condensed version of a game you could make, right?
Yeah.
You had the limit on the colors, limit on the size of everything. You had these hard limits that force you to really cut as much of it out as you could and just make a game. And that was kind of really important to me. And I started to make this platformer, and I was like really excited about it, really into it. And I planned it all out, and it just wasn't quite getting there.
Yeah.
And that was tough. I built like prototypes of that, and I'm still planning on coming back to it, but it wasn't clicking. And then as we were working on that, this guy in London called Chris Maltby had come out with an engine called Gameboy Studio, which was a brand new engine. And the benefit of that was anything you built in it would the output would be a Game Boy ROM directly, a ROM you could actually play on the original hardware. And it was like, oh man, at the time we caught it just as it pretty much came out, I think. And it was like nearly no one had made anything for it. So a few of my friends in America were like, we got to do a game jam on this thing, see what we can make with this thing. Yeah. We all split off to make our own thing. And it was, we were going to just take 2 weeks and see what we could make. And a platformer wouldn't have worked. So the game I was working on wasn't quite going to work on what the engine was at the time. It was like top-down Pokemon style games.
But now with GB Studio 2, it's kind of doing that, but at least the one that you were using. Exactly.
Yeah, they've opened it up now, which is cool. So I had the story that I was trying to tell desperately for ages. Like I had done like comic stuff and what they call it, Inktober's. I'd drawn stuff for it, and I've been playing around with it. It's like, I think I've found stuff from like 10 years back.
Wow.
And I thought, why not shave off the smallest piece of this, like a side story, and make it about that? Because the nature of the engine was like an RPG kind of thing, like a narrative story. So I took off of our game jam and I started putting together that game. And I didn't hit the jam deadline, which seems to be a trend with me.
Yeah.
But I had done enough work, and I could build the game onto my phone. Like I had, I think it's My Boy, the emulator on Android.
Yeah.
So I was exporting my builds onto my phone and taking it to work, and people were playing it. And it felt like it was too much of a thing to just say, the jam's over, I'm not doing it.
Exactly.
So I took another 2 weeks. It was developed in a month, I think.
That blows my mind, dude.
It all came together. And looking back on it, I mean, I barely slept making it. And I was working full days at my job as well. So I just came home and I'd work on it. But like, it's almost like I can't remember the time. It just happened.
Such a frenetic blur of everything.
Yeah, it was so much fun to just do it. And I think the limitations of what you can and can't get away with on it, like on a Game Boy, it was difficult in places, but in the end, it really helped hammer that into what it ended up being. And I had made games in the past, like programmed little things, never a full begin to end narrative story. It was always like little arcadey ideas.
Yeah.
But it was the first time I'd finished a narrative beginning to end game with like credits as a story. And seeing people react to that was like huge. Like I hadn't ever experienced anything like that. Like I think I came home I think it was the day or two after I released it, and there was like a playthrough on YouTube.
Yeah.
And like I didn't even think that was a thing. I was gonna be a thing,
And what's fun, going back to our earlier talking point, it seems that every playthrough I've seen on YouTube, somebody pronounces the name differently, which is awesome.
That's it. Yeah. It's awesome. My favorite thing about that, I always kind of wanted to write stuff, and I never thought I have never been a writer. I never thought I was good enough to be a writer.
Are you kidding me?
well, this game is like all writing, right?
It's
and
amazing.
seeing people react to that strongly kind of was the most important thing to me to come out of it, because I was like, oh man, maybe that is something I can do.
Yeah, dude.
But there was a guy who played it entirely in Spanish. I think his name was Sailor Satan, and it was awesome. His audience was all Spanish. He was speaking entirely in Spanish. The game isn't localized in Spanish, so he could obviously read English.
Very
but
cool.
he was responding to story beats like exactly how I planned to, in a language that wasn't my own language. It was just like, that was one of the coolest things to see.
And like that kind of passion, right? Like, because I've done things where it's like, it's of course the flippant thing where you're like, nobody gives a shit. This is kind of my passion thing. And that's where people are like resonate. And it's so cool to see somebody seek out your content that isn't convenient, right?
Yeah, that was the craziest thing to me.
What I love is that you start off on a platformer, which, you know, in indie gaming is kind of like well-worn territory at this point. You have games like Super Meat Boy and stuff. And a lot of it's just this like grind heavy, torturous, you know, you just keep bashing your head against a wall. And this game is just not that. It is this just sublime pace. It's got a great, you know, structure in terms of time commitment. And to your point, which I think is amazing, it's easy to play on a handheld that's like a phone, because I hate touch screens for any kind of gaming. And I, like so much so we were talking about, I have several emulators, and I put this on my phone and it played at a great pace. It was smooth. The sound was great. And I was like, this just feels different.
That's another thing that kind of surprised me. I wasn't expecting it at all, but I wish I did a better job of collecting this stuff. But people seem to have played it on every different thing they can run it on. And I keep getting different pictures. One person put it on a Super Game Boy and played it through a CRT.
I saw that.
I was like, I didn't even think about that. And it looks really cool with like that super lo-fi, buzzy looking monitor. People are playing it on their Wii U's, like you say, their phone. Someone was doing a 3DS. A friend of mine tested it on his Vita, and it makes so much sense that you can emulate this stuff anywhere. But I never even thought about that. It was not a part of my mind at all.
Yeah, I saw a PSP hack that was playing it. I thought it was great.
Yeah, it's gotten so funny now to me. Like, me and the friend who initially were going to build Game Boy games were way into the Game Boy, obviously, and he's super into the modding scene. And we look on Reddit at modded Game Boys every now and then, and I think 3 times in the past sort of month they've been using my game as the example that their mods work. And I never even expected that. It was such a surprise. I was like, I just want to buy a Game Boy, and it was my stuff there. So that was crazy.
And so what influenced you in terms of the content itself? Because obviously, like you said, the format, it looks very much like Pokemon. And the last game you were working on, I saw on your Instagram, looked more Castlevania. And so in terms of the visual themes and story themes, what were some of your inspirations?
The biggest ones are the Game Boy are huge ones. Obviously, like some people pointed out, like Link to the Past and Pokemon are like obviously huge games for me. But in terms of how the game works, I sometimes feel bad, but it's like so much Majora's Mask. I didn't want to. The point wasn't like time in the same way as Majora's Mask works, because you can miss certain windows on that game. Yeah. But I like the idea of this like hard countdown. So that was kind of an inspiration and kind of not at the same time. But it is pretty heavy in it, I suppose. You know, like Lovecraftian horror stuff in a lot of the story.
Yep. I actually use that adjective in discussing it with my wife. I was like, that opening image is so ethereal and cosmic horror. I love it.
Yeah. I like in horror the kind of like oppression. There's like a heavy weight in the air, and it doesn't always have to be like a visual thing, but you can just feel something bad is coming. And like that's something I definitely wanted to try and carry into it.
Well, that's one of the things that's great about choosing to do the Game Boy is you can't rely on graphics. You can't rely on stereo sound necessarily. You have a very limited focus. I mean, in terms of pixels on a screen, but also in terms of just the environment you can create. So that's I'm so shocked that you didn't think yourself to be a writer, because all this is, all the drama, all the tension is your story, which is rad.
Yeah, I really liked there's little bits in it I'm super proud of. I don't want to talk about too much for fear of spoilers, but like the relationships between people, I think in a lot of horror stuff that I like, movies and such, my favorite kind of horror is the horror from people and interactions between people. So like Hereditary and the family, and Funny Games and the invaded family, like that uncomfort is something I try to carry in it. And like some of these people in the game are related to each other, or some actions you take, you haven't really taken into account everyone else around you before you start doing things. And there's things in there that tie into that I tried to relate it to. I tried to explain that once in a written interview, and it sounded so douchey and pretentious. But it was like, I like the idea that like there's a lot of different endings in the game, but certain ones are impacted by how you behave to certain people, and like that's kind of important to me as well.
I totally get that.
Yeah.
And I understand what you're saying as far as coming across as kind of pretentious, because it's hard to equivocate without sounding almost condescending to other media, right? Because basically it's like, I don't care what the scale of your horror is. On a base level, what will affect me? And that's one of the things that makes, Ari Aster films and stuff so impactful is it's that visceral nature where, I mean, it looks like you're a fan of the movie The Void as well, right?
Oh yeah, huge. I love that film.
That film's like, you look at that budget and sure, it's a little derivative of The Thing and some other stuff, but when you look at what they did, it's just all reduced to brass tacks. Nobody gives a fuck how many millions of dollars you have or how much green screen you have. This is what we're dealing with. And like that movie is just like a testament to like ingenuity to me. And that's kind of like what your game is. So when I was scrolling through your Instagram, which also shameless plug at IZ.MA, it was fun to find.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of horror films like that, like, Mandy and The Void and these like, they're so different to what so many other things are. Like that whole like sort of last, again, I don't want to give away too much for anyone who hasn't seen it, but the last act of The Void, where like a lot of it is just light and dark and strange places, and like I love that sort of stuff.
A lot of it's what you don't see that makes it important, which almost sounds like the way that like douchey people would describe jazz. It's the notes they're not, but like it lets your imagination fill in the blank. Because like honestly, CGI is getting great, but I still, not to toot my own horn, think that my imagination is a little bit better. And so movies like that or games like yours, where I'm putting myself in the role of this character, like I remember when I first started it, I booted up, and so everybody knows the story starts off with a dream. You wake up, and there are certain people you can interact with where you start to see symmetry in their story and yours. And just the idea of like going across the street and seeing my best friend and being like, "What's up?" And they're like, "Hey, eerie thing." That like was a very nice story cue, or that was something that for some reason like I never knew would kind of creep me out, but the idea of like actually experiencing it was fun.
Yeah, it came together a lot better than I thought it would, and it was like so much fun. I remember I went out for a meal with a game designer, like a legit sort of 10 plus year industry game designer, and I was like kind of frantic over my beer, being like, "Yeah, it's gonna go like this, and here's my plan." And I showed them like the demos I had, and they were like, "Yeah, that doesn't sound like it's gonna work."
Oh no!
They were like, "Oh, maybe not." And I was like so invested in it, I was like, "I gotta try anyway." And they weren't mean about it, but I'd say more realistic. So I'm glad I stuck through it.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the hard things. It's such an intangible, because like I had found, I think it's Dragonborn, and I thought that was such a novelty to see a Game Boy game in 2020. But that game's not really my style necessarily. And so I just kept kind of looking at homebrew stuff, and that's how I found yours. And just like, I understand how to a casual person, they're like, why would you do that? Like, it's just so bizarre.
Yeah.
And so, especially somebody with hands-on experience in that way, but that's one of the beautiful parts about the internet, is that you'll find your audience kind of copacetically, right?
Well, I think that's it, right? Like, there's something out there for everyone. I always hear that argument, like, there's no good music anymore, and it's like if you're saying that, you're not looking, because there's more music than there's ever been, and it's the same with movies and games and anything you could ever want. So I agree with that 100%.
And I mean, just in an affordable scale too. Like, look at Tubi, for instance. It's free, and you can find all these things that were basically lost to time. And now, like, kind of tangentially related, but like, there's a movie Grizzly that's on Tubi, and now Grizzly 2 is being released after almost 40 years of having been unreleased. They're finding their audience, and that's what's cool with your game. Like you said, people are hacking PlayStation portables, which is an antiquated system, to jailbreak it and put your game on there so they can take this with them and have tangible media. Like, it's got to feel like like your progeny is going off and growing up and taking over the world, right?
It's so strange. I am so grateful to everyone who shows me what they do, but it's so strange to me. Like, I'm happy you brought up Dragonborn and the Spaceport guys. I think it's one guy. Me and him talk every now and then.
Yeah.
He, in my opinion, is like a step ahead, or a few steps ahead of me with his physical release. I really want to do it. Me and him talk every now and then about setting that up for me. Yeah, I think that might be a next step for me, is physical release.
I think that'd be really cool, especially horror fans. It's like a special and unique breed of person who wants that media. Like, I know so many people who are like, oh yeah, I know that I could find this movie online for free, but I need the VHS, the DVD, the Laserdisc, and the Blu-ray.
Dude, I get like that sometimes. Turbo Kid's my favorite movie, and I got the VHS and stuff. Like, I love that film.
Turbo Kid rips so fucking hard. I love, like, I remember I found it, and then I found the short that it was based on, and I basically peddled that out like I was gonna make money off of it somehow because I was so into it.
That team is so cool. RKSS, the 3 developers have made it. Awesome.
Are you a fan of Kung Fury?
Yes, that film's great as well. I love that sort of. I think it all falls into like a kind of group of movies that's super like lo-fi. What people want to exist, they just made it.
Yeah,
kind of,
and I think that's one of the cool things is like you don't need the best effects. You need the story behind it. You need the ingenuity behind it. Because I mean, frankly, Kung Fury looks fake as fuck, but I don't need it to look real. I need it to express something where I've never seen a guy run on a barrel rolling car through the air to shoot people and then kick them. Right? Like,
I love that. I think it was in the trailer, but the skateboard car flip.
Yeah, exactly. And so let me ask
film.
you, what inspired you to do 11 different endings for the game?
It's that ended up being a bit of a nightmare to get right, but it was kind of the kind of game it is. By admission, isn't too hard to make. There had to be something that was worth doing for it, like, and I wanted it to be this thing where you could do whatever you wanted. I 100% understand why this happens, but there are so many games out there where you can do whatever you want, but it all comes back to either the same ending or 2 choices at the end, no matter which way you go. And like I say, I've been through the machine on this. I know why that happens because this is a nightmare. If this game was any bigger, it probably wouldn't have happened for what it did.
Gotcha. It
was important to me that there was no guiding hand. There are some clues as to what maybe they should do. And also there are some tricks of like making someone do something, but it might not have been the right thing to do. Yeah. And I wanted it to be completely fluid and people could go whichever way they wanted and something would happen. This is a spoiler for one of them, but it's the easiest one to get and some people would try it. But like I got people be like, well, I'll just go to bed. I don't want to do anything. And it was important to me that they could do that because another one is you could just leave and everyone's like Resident Evil was my favorite game ever. And they're like, why don't they just leave the house? And I was like, well, make it so they can leave. Because
then there's no story, right?
Well, I put that in and it became like a bit of a mixed thing. I watched it on Twitch streams. People just left and they were upset that they could. And some people get upset that they can't just leave because it doesn't make sense narratively. So it was important to me to put it in. Yeah. And then some people were as upset that it is in there as the people who were upset that it wouldn't be. So that was a bit of a mixed thing. But it was important to me that people could do whichever path they wanted and get something out of it.
That's awesome. And so what I was going all the way back, Lavender Town. Obviously the game looks like Pokemon. Was that an inspiration? Because what's weird, Lavender Town is my favorite part of Pokemon. I never really became the hugest fan, but I loved that kind of eerie thing. But I liked that it didn't sound like that was your initial inspiration. Was that almost like just happenstance, the similarity?
It kind of is. Yeah. I think I mentioned in one talk I did about this, but like I think it's more inspired by kind of creepypastas and Pokemon.
The binaural tones
Pokemon
one?
Black. Yeah. Was it? They called it like Pokemon Black as well before there was an actual Pokemon Black. It was just like with the label missing. I used to love Pokemon a lot and I missed it for like, I think 3 or 4 generations. And I've only just started looking back into that because, I mean, those games were always great. It's just like, they're such time sinks. But no, I wouldn't say an explicit taking from it, but I can totally see that it's like almost like a direct parallel,
Not to be overly punny about like the ghost town, but is it a spiritual successor? Boom! Sorry, that was a action. I legitimately feel kind of terrible making that joke.
You got to do it, man. You gotta do it.
That's what pays the bills, right? Now, you said you were working on another game, the PS1 game. Do you want to talk a little bit about that before we let our fans go?
Yeah, I'd love to. I feel a little bit bad that, like I say, I missed the deadline, but I also missed the deadline with Deadeus, so it's still coming. I recently lost my job, and I'm getting back into everything there, so that has knocked onto my time.
Gotcha.
Getting back into everything, but it's a shooter puzzler game based on games like Doom, Silent Hill, and a game in the UK is called Karushi, but for you guys it's called Intelligent Cube.
Okay.
Where it was like blocks coming towards the player. I love that game because I would tell everyone who hasn't heard of that game to give it a go. At least do the first level because it's this oppressive atmosphere, but it's a puzzle game. It's almost expressly a puzzle game, but it's like super creepy and I love it.
The way I would look at it, I said to my friend, Thrill Kill meets Portal is the simplest way I could say it. Like obviously not the Thrill Kill in the way it plays, but just that kind of like gritty aesthetic and I don't know. I really, it looks promising already.
Yeah, the game.
Yes, yours. Sorry.
People responding to it has been kind of cool. I'm not actually a 3D guy much either. So this will be my first product I've ever made in 3D for myself.
Oh wow!
And that's been a ton of fun to work it all out. I'm kind of like learning as I go, and it's been awesome for it because like I know exactly how this game's going to work, and then it's like knowing the beginning and the end and just working out the middle pieces,
like a detective story.
Kind of, yeah. And it's been a ton of fun. The 3D art has been especially rewarding. The game itself was an old 2D prototype that I made years ago in pixel art.
Oh, interesting.
And in my head, the game looked like it does now in 3D, but I was trying to convey that in pixel art, and it was just never going to be the same. But now seeing it in 3D, it's like I should have always done that. I should have always had planned it this way. So that was kind of rewarding to see it slowly come together. The kind of game I want it to end up being. Have you ever played Devil Daggers?
No, I haven't.
I wholeheartedly recommend you give that a look today because I think it's like $5, but it's a game you can't finish. It's like a short horror, kind of like a wave shooter kind of thing, but it's like pretty horror styled. It's quite heavily inspired by that as well, where I want it to be like the whole thing about Devil Daggers is time and comparing time with other players, and I want this to be like kind of see how long you can survive kind of game.
Very cool. I love games where it's inevitable that you can't win because it's a kind of a parable for life, because it's like there's no winning at life. There's just the only way that you win is a comparative analysis. There's no like benchmark, right?
That's exactly what this is going to be.
Hell yeah. So can you let our fans know where they can find you and more importantly, support you monetarily?
So I go by IZMA online everywhere, usually characterized as like -IZMA and you can find my website. My itch.io is where I sell my previous game. You can download that for free, but there's a $5 special edition that comes with a bunch of art, including some of the current work for the sequel, which will be coming. And then on Instagram, iz.ma.
Perfect. And Slashers Podcast is happily buying one of the premium copies to support, and we'll be doing a giveaway with that. So stay tuned, and you can find out how to enter and win.
Cool.
Awesome.
This is awesome, man.
I'm really happy to do it. I saw that you're a fan of Pilaf as well from Dragon Ball, so I had to support you because he's been unjustly maligned through shows like Balling Out Super, where he's been treated like some dawdling child, when in truth, he is the emperor of my soul, and hopefully yours as well.
I'll have to do some more drawings, man. It's been a while. It's been too long since I did it. So I'll have to do more for him.
I appreciate it. Well, thank you so much for making yourself available. And I look forward to talking to you and supporting you in future releases.
Cool. Thank you very much. This was awesome.